All right, so we talk a lot about stretching the hip flexor out and getting mobility through the front of the hip. The big thing is you have to move within that range and be able to control that range. You can stretch your hip flexors all day, but you have to be able to control that range. So here's a really good exercise to be doing right after your hip flexor stretching. You'll start on your stomach, and I want you to drive hands into the ground. And what we'll do is you'll squeeze glutes, drive into the ground with your hands, and then extend hip out and hold, and then relax down. And we'll do the same thing again. So squeeze glutes, drive into the ground here to engage your core, and extend through your hip. The one thing that I don't want you doing is where you're extending through your low back and creating any torque through your low back. So good exercise to try right after stretching out your hip flexors, and you'll get your posterior chain firing and opening up and controlling that range to the front of your hip. All right, so today I want to give you a little tweak to your hip flexor stretching. Make sure you're not doing more harm than good. So we'll go in that usual position, half kneeling. A lot of times people are stretching their hip flexors and they're getting here and they're just arching through their back. Sometimes that can just do more harm than good in the low back. So what I want you to do is set up in that position, keep neutral spine, and then you'll tuck tail under and squeeze glutes. So it's a really small, subtle movement, and you should feel it through the front of the hip already there. And then in that position, you'll slide or translate hips forward, and it'll really light up that front of the hip. So once again, it's a small movement here, tuck under, slide forward, and then you can add in reaching up overhead. So just a little tweak to keep neutral spine when stretching out your hip flexors, and it should make a big difference. Thanks, guys. So in this video, we're going to talk a little different about the hip flexors. We spend a lot of time stretching them and getting them loosened out to loosen up your low back and your hips. But in this video are the 3 different variations to doing some hip flexor strengthening. So first one, you're just starting laying on your back. And then the second one here, you'll actually bridge up and do the resisted hip flexion. And last video, you'll transition it all the way to standing, so where it actually is functional in everyday movement. And it's just something that you can't forget about for strengthening, and good way to complement your stretching. All right, so today we're going to give you 2 tips for some hip mobility and spinal mobility. Let's jump right into it. So first, you always start with some support. You're going to use the rig today, but the wall is a great place to start too. So you're going to go into your deep squat, and then you're going to do openers, reaching back and up overhead. So we'll do both ways there. And then get your hips involved. We'll do the same thing in your deep squat. You're going to roll hip in and out. That ankle may roll with it, which is fine. Same thing doing both sides. Then you'll transition that, be a little tougher. You'll go without the support, and same thing. Reaching up overhead. And then the hip one will be especially tough without the support. So give that a try, guys, and let us know how it goes.